Why your strongest spiritual growth often happens in private. If you feel hidden right now, God may be growing your roots. There is a kind of spiritual growth nobody claps for. It happens when the room is dark, the phone is face down on the nightstand, and you are lying awake replaying a conversation you wish you had handled differently. It happens when you are standing at the kitchen sink with your sleeves pushed up, washing the same coffee mug for the second time because your mind is somewhere else. You are thinking about the prayer you have prayed for months, the one that still seems to be floating unanswered somewhere above the ceiling. And if you are honest, you do not feel especially spiritual in those moments. You feel tired, you feel overlooked, maybe even a little embarrassed, because you thought you would be further along by now. You thought spiritual growth would feel more obvious, more powerful, more visible. You thought there would be a moment when everything finally clicked, the anxiety disappeared, the temptation stopped calling your name, and you became the calm, faithful person you keep trying to be. But instead, you are still here, still wrestling, still praying prayers that sometimes feel clumsy, still trying to trust God when nobody is watching. But what if this quiet season is not proof that nothing is happening? What if it is the exact place where the deepest work is happening? A tree does not become strong because everyone can see its branches. It becomes strong because in the darkness beneath the soil, its roots are reaching for water. And maybe that is where you are right now, not abandoned, not forgotten, not spiritually failing. You may simply be in what I call the hidden root season. The private place where God grows something in you that public attention could never produce. And before this is over, I want to show you how to recognize that hidden growth in your own life. Because you may be changing more deeply than you realize, even if nobody around you can see it yet. And there is one sign of hidden growth that most people completely overlook, because while it is happening, it does not feel like strength. It often feels like weakness. Part 1. The growth nobody can post. Let's be brutally honest for a second. Sometimes we do not realize how much we have started measuring our spiritual lives by what can be seen. We feel close to God when the worship music gives us chills. We feel useful when someone tells us our words helped them. We feel encouraged when a prayer is answered quickly enough to become a testimony, and none of those things are wrong. But what happens when there is nothing impressive to show? What happens when your greatest spiritual victory this week was not a breakthrough anybody would notice, but the fact that you sat on the edge of your bed at 1:17 in the morning, opened a message that hurt you, typed an angry response with your thumb hovering over send, and then quietly deleted it? No applause, no dramatic music, no one even knew there was a battle. But heaven saw it. Jesus said in Matthew 6:6, "But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly." Notice that phrase, which seeth in secret. God is paying attention to the moments nobody else can measure. He sees you close the app because comparison is starting to poison your peace. He sees you stop yourself halfway through repeating a piece of gossip. He sees you apologize without adding the little sentence that secretly shifts the blame back onto the other person. And I know what you might be thinking right now, but these things feel so small. They are not small. They are hidden. There is a difference. A seed under the soil does not look productive. It does not look powerful. It cannot be photographed in a way that impresses anyone. But underneath the surface, something is breaking open. Maybe your faith is doing that right now. Maybe growth is not always becoming louder, more confident, or more visible. Maybe sometimes growth is becoming more honest, more restrained, more willing to obey God when there is no audience to reward you for it. Do not underestimate the quiet decisions. Some of the most important changes in your life will not look impressive while they are happening. But God sees them, and in the next season, you may discover that the decision nobody noticed was the decision that quietly changed you. Part 2. The hidden root season. There are seasons when your life feels strangely uneventful. You wake up, you go to work, you answer messages, you make dinner. You fold the laundry you left sitting in the basket for 2 days. You pray, but the prayer does not feel dramatic. You read a few verses, but nothing seems to leap off the page. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet question begins to form. God, am I actually growing at all? I know that feeling. It is frustrating when you are trying to become a stronger person, but your life does not seem to be moving forward in any obvious way. You expected progress to look like a door opening, a sudden breakthrough, a clear sign. Instead, it feels like you are standing still. But this is where we need to understand something I call the hidden root season. A tree does not spend all its energy producing visible fruit before it can survive strong winds, long droughts, or heavy rain. It has to develop something underground, something nobody compliments, something nobody photographs. Roots. And sometimes God is doing that kind of work in you. Before David ever stood in front of Goliath, he spent years alone in the fields, protecting sheep where hardly anyone noticed. In 1 Samuel 17:37, David said, "The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." The public victory was not born in public. It was prepared in private. And even Jesus lived through hidden years before his public ministry began. Luke 2:52 says, "And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man." That growth was real, even when it was quiet. Maybe God is not delaying your life. Maybe he is strengthening the part of you that must be able to carry what you keep asking him to give you. Your patience, your discernment, your ability to stay faithful when you do not feel emotionally rewarded, your willingness to obey without needing constant reassurance. Do not despise the season where nothing seems to be happening. Roots rarely make noise, but hidden growth becomes hardest to trust when heaven itself seems quiet. Because it is one thing to grow without applause, it is another thing to pray and wonder whether God is listening at all. Part 3. When silence feels like rejection. There is a kind of silence that can make even a faithful person feel forgotten. You pray before bed. You pray again in the car the next morning. You whisper the same request while standing in the grocery store aisle, staring at a shelf of cereal boxes without really seeing any of them because your mind is somewhere else. And nothing changes. No clear answer. No sudden peace. No door opening. Just the same problem waiting for you when you wake up. Let's be honest. After a while, silence starts to feel personal. I remember a season when I kept praying about the same thing, and nothing seemed to move. I would open my Bible, read a few lines, close it again, and still feel exactly the same. What hurt most was not only the unanswered prayer, it was the quiet fear that maybe God was disappointed in me. Looking back, I can see that he was not abandoning me. He was teaching me to stop treating silence like a verdict. You begin asking questions you are almost afraid to say out loud. God, did I do something wrong? Are you disappointed in me? Do you hear everyone else more clearly than you hear me? If you have ever thought those things, you are not weak, you are human. David knew this feeling. In Psalm 13:1, he cried, "How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me?" That is not the prayer of a man pretending everything is fine. That is the voice of someone who loves God deeply and still feels confused by his silence. But silence is not always rejection. Sometimes silence is the place where God begins separating your faith from your need for immediate reassurance. Think about how often we reach for our phones without even realizing it. We refresh the inbox, check the notification, open the same app again. We are looking for a tiny signal that says, "You matter. Something is happening. You have not been forgotten." And sometimes we bring that same nervous habit into prayer. We want God to answer quickly because waiting feels too much like abandonment. And when you have already been disappointed by people, even God's silence can begin to touch an old wound. But Psalm 27:14 says, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart." Notice what the verse does not say. It does not say waiting will always feel peaceful. It says God will strengthen your heart inside the waiting. Maybe the silence is not empty. Maybe God is teaching your soul to breathe without constant confirmation. Maybe He is building a faith that can remain steady even when the room is quiet. The answer is delayed, and all you have left to hold on to is His character. You are not being ignored. You may be learning how to trust God at a depth that noise could never teach you. Part 4. The private battle is not a small battle. Some of the most important battles of your life will never look important from the outside. Nobody sees the moment when you are sitting alone on the edge of the couch, the room lit only by your phone, and your finger pauses over something you already know will pull your mind in the wrong direction. Nobody hears the thought that rises when someone mentions the person who hurt you. Nobody knows how quickly your chest tightens when you see their name appear on the screen. And nobody applauds when you make the quieter choice. You close the page, you change the subject, you put the phone down. You whisper, "God help me," even though part of you still wants to do the exact opposite. Let's be brutally honest for a second. We often imagine spiritual warfare as something dramatic, something loud, something that would look powerful in a movie. But many spiritual battles are decided in a window so small that you could almost miss it. I call it the 5-second altar. It is that tiny space between the impulse and the action. The 5 seconds before you send the bitter message, the 5 seconds before you click, the 5 seconds before you repeat the gossip because it feels good to be the person who knows something first, the 5 seconds before you defend yourself when the Holy Spirit is quietly asking you to listen. That moment is not insignificant. That is where you place your desire on the altar and decide who gets the final word. Proverbs 16:32 says, "He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city." Think about that. God says the person who learns to govern their own spirit is stronger than someone who conquers an entire city. Not because restraint is easy, because it is not. Sometimes obedience feels like sitting in silence with your jaw clenched, your hands shaking slightly, and your heart still racing after you chose not to react. But James 1:12 says, "Blessed is the man that endureth temptation." Your private battle matters. The decision nobody saw matters. Every time you choose obedience in that 5-second window, something inside you is becoming stronger. You are not just resisting a moment, you are becoming the kind of person who can be trusted with the next season. The next time temptation comes, do not ask whether 5 seconds matter. Ask what kind of person those 5 seconds are forming. Part 5. Why God sometimes removes the audience. There are seasons when the encouragement becomes quieter. The person who used to check on you stops asking how you are doing. The people around you do not seem to notice how hard you are trying. You keep showing up, keep praying, keep making the right choices, and nobody says, "I see how much this is costing you." That can hurt more than we like to admit. Because even when we genuinely love God, part of us still wants somebody to notice. You want someone to recognize that you did not send the message you wanted to send, that you smiled politely at work while carrying a private grief you could barely explain, that you stood alone in the hallway for a moment before opening the door because you needed to pull yourself together first. You are not shallow for wanting encouragement. You are human. But there is a difference between receiving encouragement and needing it in order to keep obeying. Sometimes you do not realize how much you depend on being noticed until nobody notices anymore. The message does not come. The person you hoped would understand remains silent. The effort costs you more than anyone knows. And suddenly, you have to decide whether obedience still matters when it gives you no emotional reward. But sometimes God allows the room to become quieter because He is asking a deeper question. Will you still obey me when nobody applauds? Jesus spoke about this in Matthew 6:1. "Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them." He was not saying that every public act is fake. He was warning us about something subtle. There is a dangerous kind of spiritual life that survives only when someone is watching. It looks faithful in public, but quietly loses its strength in private. You pray with more focus when someone may notice. You keep serving when gratitude is likely. You remain disciplined while your effort is visible. But when the room becomes quiet, a deeper question rises. Do I truly want the presence of God, or do I want the feeling of being admired for seeking Him? That is not an easy question, and it is not meant to shame you. Sometimes God loves you enough to remove the audience, not to punish you, but to free you from a faith that can survive only on applause. Because sometimes the private season reveals how much of our peace has been rented from the opinions of others. God may be building something more stable in you, a faith that does not collapse when nobody compliments it, a kindness that does not need to be repaid, an obedience that remains steady even when it feels invisible. You are not being overlooked. You are learning the difference between being seen by people and being known by God. Part 6. Ordinary rooms can become holy ground. Sometimes we imagine that meaningful encounters with God must happen in meaningful places. A quiet church sanctuary, a retreat in the mountains, a room filled with worship music and soft lighting. And those moments can be beautiful. But let's be honest, most of your life does not happen in places like that. Most of your life happens while you are reheating dinner in the microwave, sitting in traffic with one hand on the steering wheel, or standing in the bathroom at work for an extra minute because you are trying not to cry before returning to your desk. Those places may not feel spiritual, but they can become sacred. I think about the person who sits alone in a parked car after a long day, both hands still resting on the steering wheel even though the engine has already been turned off. They are not ready to walk inside yet. Maybe there is someone waiting at home who needs them to be patient. Maybe there are bills on the table. Maybe they spent the whole day holding themselves together for everyone else. And for a few quiet seconds, they do not know how to pray. So they simply whisper, "God, I do not have much left." No music begins playing. No sudden answer appears. Nothing changes outside the windshield. But something honest has happened. They stopped pretending they were fine. And sometimes that is where holy ground begins. In Exodus 3:5, when Moses stood before the burning bush, God said, "Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground." What made that ground holy? It was not the location. It was the presence of God. And God is not limited to stained glass windows. He can meet you beside a sink filled with dishes. He can meet you in a dim bedroom when sleep will not come. He can meet you in a parked car after a difficult conversation, while the engine is off and the silence feels heavier than you expected. Maybe you do not know what to pray in those moments. That is okay. You do not need a polished speech. Sometimes the most honest prayer is simply, "God, I am not doing well right now." Sometimes it is, "I am angry and I do not know what to do with it." Sometimes it is just a deep breath and the decision not to run from Him. Psalm 139:7 asks, "Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whither shall I flee from thy presence?" You do not have to manufacture a spiritual atmosphere before God comes near. You do not have to clean yourself up emotionally before you speak to Him. The real version of you is the version He wants to meet, not the composed version. Not the church version, the tired version standing barefoot in the kitchen at midnight, holding a glass of water and trying to make sense of your own heart. Ordinary rooms become holy ground when you stop pretending. And sometimes your deepest growth begins with nothing more dramatic than telling God the truth. Part 7. How to cooperate with private growth. So what do you actually do during a hidden root season? Because I know what you might be thinking right now. This sounds meaningful, but tomorrow morning I am still going to wake up tired. I am still going to reach for my phone before I reach for my Bible. I am still going to feel distracted when I pray. That does not mean you are failing. You do not need to redesign your entire life by Monday morning. Private growth rarely begins with a dramatic promise. It usually begins with one honest decision. Maybe before you get out of bed, you sit still for 60 seconds and say, "God, show me what is really happening inside me today." Maybe you keep one small promise you have quietly broken too many times. Maybe you take a slow 3-minute walk after work without reaching for your phone. allowing the noise inside you to settle before you step into the rest of your evening. Not because silence earns God's love, because distraction can become a hiding place. Psalm 139:23-24 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me, and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." That is a brave prayer. It is not asking God to make you look better. It is asking Him to make you honest. Here is one practice that may help. Keep a small, hidden root journal. Nothing polished, nothing you would feel pressure to post. It can be a cheap notebook with bent corners or a note hidden on your phone. At the end of the day, answer 3 questions. What is God exposing in me? What small act of obedience is directly in front of me? What change is happening that nobody else can see yet? Do this for 7 nights. Do not try to sound spiritual. Do not write what you think you should feel. Write what is actually true. Some days, your answer may be 1 sentence. Some days, it may simply be, "I wanted to react, but I waited." Do not dismiss that. Zechariah 4:10 asks, "For who hath despised the day of small things?" God is not asking you to become impressive overnight. He is asking you to stay available. 1 honest prayer, 1 quiet act of obedience, 1 5-second altar at a time. That is how roots grow. And if you are in that season right now, you do not have to explain the whole story. You can simply write, "Let the roots grow deep." Part 8. You may be stronger than you think. Maybe you have been listening to all of this and thinking, "But I still feel weak." You still lose patience sometimes. You still wake up with the same anxious thoughts circling before your feet even touch the floor. You still have days when you sit with your Bible open beside a half-finished cup of coffee, reread the same paragraph 3 times, and realize your mind has wandered somewhere else again. And because the struggle is still present, you assume you have not grown. But let me ask you something. Are you responding to the struggle the same way you used to? Look more carefully. One of the clearest signs that your roots are growing deeper is not that the struggle disappears. It is that you recover faster, you return sooner, you stop hiding earlier, you tell the truth more quickly. The presence of a struggle does not always mean the absence of growth. Maybe the fear still comes, but now you pray before letting it control the entire day. Maybe the anger still rises, but now you recognize it before it spills onto everyone around you. Maybe the temptation still knocks on the door, but you no longer invite it inside, make it comfortable, and pretend it belongs there. That matters. Sometimes we misunderstand spiritual maturity. We think becoming stronger means never feeling the pull again, never becoming tired, never having doubts, never needing to start over. But the Bible does not describe strength that way. In Proverbs 24:16 it says, "For a just man falleth 7 times, and riseth up again." Notice what makes him righteous. It is not that he never falls. It is that he keeps getting back up. Maybe this is what private growth actually looks like. The distance between the fall and the return begins to shrink. Conviction does not have to chase you for as long. You spend less time defending what you already know needs to be surrendered. You come back to God sooner, not because the struggle was never real, but because hiding no longer feels like home. That may not feel dramatic, but it is deeply significant. Philippians 1:6 says, "He which hath begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ." You are not a finished work, and God is not disappointed that the process still looks like a process. So do not measure your strength only by how little you struggle. Measure it by where you go when the struggle comes. The fact that you are still reaching for God, even with shaking hands, may be proof that your roots are already deeper than you realize. Conclusion: let the roots grow deep. Maybe nobody can see what God is doing in you right now. Your life may still look ordinary from the outside. The dishes still need washing. The bills still arrive. The same difficult conversation still waits for you. Some mornings, your first response to the alarm is not a beautiful prayer, it is a tired sigh. But please do not confuse hidden growth with wasted time. The prayer you whispered when you did not have the strength to sound spiritual mattered. The apology you gave without defending yourself mattered. The moment you closed the screen, swallowed the bitter reply, or sat quietly with God instead of escaping into distraction mattered. Those moments may never become stories you tell on a stage, but they are becoming part of who you are. Colossians 2:7 says, "Rooted and built up in Him and established in the faith." Roots grow in darkness, they grow slowly, they grow without applause. But when the wind comes, roots are the reason the tree remains standing. So choose one private act of obedience today, one honest prayer, one 5-second altar, one quiet return to God. And when nobody else sees it, remember this: your Father sees in secret. You are not forgotten. You are not falling behind. You are in a hidden root season. Let the roots grow deep.